country America loves, with the tale of one legend. Hank Williams' last journey began in Knoxville and ended in tragedy just up the road.
For decades, one of country music's greatest enigmas remained unresolved. It hovered like a shadow over American music history, sparking speculation, fueling documentaries, inspiring countless theories, and haunting those closest to the legacy of the legendary Hank Williams. The mystery surrounding his untimely death in the back seat of a baby blue Cadillac on New Year's Day 1953 never quite sat comfortably with anyone. It had always been too vague, too riddled with inconsistencies. Whispers of foul play, cover-ups, and secret knowledge echoed through time, but nothing definitive had surfaced, until now. And the truth is far more shocking than anyone could have predicted. Before we start, hit the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. The final chapter in the life of Hank Williams has always read like a tragic poem. A young star, not even 30, already washed up in the eyes of many, alone and ailing, found lifeless in the back of a car in Oak Hill, West Virginia. His death certificate coldly stated heart failure, yet that seemed too simple, too clean for a life that had been anything but. For decades, fans and researchers accepted a general narrative. Williams' health had deteriorated due to alcohol, substance use, and the physical toll of fame. But cracks in that story were always visible for those willing to look closely. What finally cracked the mystery open was a rediscovered set of medical records and a series of corroborated testimonies that had long been dismissed as unreliable or too controversial to entertain seriously. Hidden in an old legal archive, the medical documents revealed that in the final weeks of his life, Hank had been undergoing a highly experimental medical procedure at the urging of a shadowy figure in his management team, a man whose name had largely disappeared from the official accounts. These treatments, known only by insiders, were aimed at controlling the debilitating chronic back pain Hank had been battling since a botched spinal surgery years prior. But there was more to it. The treatments weren't just experimental. They were medically reckless, bordering on criminal. Administered by an unlicensed doctor with ties to underground pharmaceutical networks, the procedure involved a combination of high-risk injections that hadn't passed any clinical trials. These substances, now known to be dangerously unstable, were delivered in secret, outside of hospital settings, sometimes in hotel rooms and dressing areas during Hank's final tour. The cocktail was meant to boost energy, dull pain, and mask the symptoms of his worsening condition, but it came at an astronomical cost to his already fragile body. Rather than helping him recover, the injections slowly destabilized his nervous system and heart function, essentially setting a ticking clock inside his chest. Further investigation has now shown that these procedures were part of a larger scheme, a clandestine network operating in the gray areas between music management, medicine, and the black market. High-profile entertainers of the era, desperate to perform and maintain their fame, were offered these services as miracle fixes, solutions that wouldn't derail their touring schedules. Hank wasn't the only one approached. What sets his case apart, however, is the extent to which he was manipulated into accepting it, pressured by both those managing his career and those financing his performances. In the weeks leading up to his death, Williams reportedly experienced intense episodes of confusion, paranoia, and even hallucinations. These episodes were privately documented by the driver who had been hired to take him from Montgomery, Alabama to Canton, Ohio for his next show. That driver, Charles Carr, long believed to be a peripheral figure in the story, has now been confirmed to have made a series of emergency calls along the route, calls that never made it into police reports or media coverage at the time. One of those calls, newly unearthed in a telecommunications archive, was made to a doctor in Tennessee, urgently requesting help because Hank isn't waking up right, and his skin's gone white like chalk. Yet help never came. The real shock lies in what followed that call. Instead of driving directly to the nearest hospital or alerting authorities, Carr was instructed by an unknown party to just keep driving. This command, now traced to a management liaison in Nashville, suggests a coordinated attempt to avoid scandal or legal repercussions for those involved in Hank's treatment. In essence, Hank Williams may have died hours before anyone officially acknowledged it, not from sudden heart failure, but from a fatal overdose of unregulated substances administered under the guise of therapy. The implications of this are massive. First, it demolishes the long-held image of Hank as a doomed alcoholic whose personal demons consumed him. Yes, he drank. Yes, he struggled. But he was also actively seeking treatment, only he was misled and medically exploited. The revelation reframes him not as a man passively succumbing to self-destruction, but as a victim of systemic negligence and greed. It wasn't just personal tragedy, it was institutional failure. This also throws a piercing spotlight on the darker underbelly of early music industry practices. In an era with few regulations and virtually no oversight, artists like Hank were easy prey for exploitative contracts, predatory doctors, and secretive backers. The Dr. Feelgood archetype, once thought to be a 1960s phenomenon, clearly existed much earlier. Hank's case suggests the roots of this dangerous culture went deeper than anyone realized. Moreover, the people involved in administering and facilitating these treatments were not fringe players. Evidence suggests that at least two major industry figures, still revered today, were aware of what was being done to Hank and chose to turn a blind eye. These individuals, in close proximity to both medical suppliers and booking agents, effectively allowed the situation to unfold unchecked. One letter, authenticated through forensic analysis, contains chilling phrasing. If the kid goes under, the dates'll still pay out. Just get the body there. This single sentence captures the stark dehumanization at play. Hank wasn't just a star, he was a revenue stream, a product to be moved, regardless of whether he was alive or not. Uncovering this has also led to a reevaluation of several key figures in Hank's circle. Family members once painted as distant or unaware are now seen in a more sympathetic light. They had been kept in the dark, told comforting half-truths or outright lies about his health. In one recorded interview from the 1980s, Hank's sister expressed regret that she wasn't able to be by his side more often. Now we know, even if she had been, it's likely she would have been kept away by those orchestrating his treatments, under the pretense of professional urgency. There's also the mystery of the missing medical file. For years, rumors swirled about a briefcase containing Hank's last prescriptions, treatment notes, and private correspondence. It vanished shortly after his death. That file has now been located, found locked in a safety deposit box in Shreveport, Louisiana, under an assumed name. Its contents were more damning than expected. Pages upon pages of handwritten notes, dosage schedules, and private journal entries from Hank himself. In those pages, a more coherent and frightened man emerges. Someone acutely aware that what was being done to him wasn't normal, but who felt powerless to stop it. "They say I'll be good as new," he wrote in one entry, "but I can't feel my hands anymore." That line is more than tragic. It's diagnostic. Medical experts reviewing the recovered documents confirmed that Hank was experiencing symptoms of neurotoxicity, consistent with prolonged exposure to synthetic compounds later banned by the FDA. These weren't mild side effects. They were the signs of a body being slowly poisoned. Knowing all this transforms how we understand not just Hank Williams the man, but Hank Williams the legend. He wasn't merely the archetypal tortured artist whose brilliance burned too brightly. He was in fact someone caught in a machinery of manipulation, forced to keep performing, even as his health collapsed. The same songs that made him immortal, "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry," "Your Cheatin' Heart," "Cold, Cold Heart," take on new weight when viewed through this lens. Each lyric becomes not just emotional expression, but quiet testimony. He wasn't dramatizing pain, he was reporting it. The ripple effects of this discovery are just beginning to be understood. Historians are revisiting archived interviews and performance tapes with renewed scrutiny. Medical ethicists are pointing to Hank's case as a critical example of why celebrity health practices must be transparent and accountable. And fans who have long revered his music are reckoning with a painful new truth, that their icon didn't simply fade away on a lonely road, but was systematically failed by those entrusted with his care. Perhaps the most unsettling part of the mystery's resolution is its silence. The cover-up didn't happen with a bang, but with a whisper. A phone call here, a forged document there, a nod from a powerful figure to sweep it all under the rug. The story held for decades not because it was airtight, but because nobody wanted to confront what the real story might cost. Admitting that Hank Williams was medically exploited would demand accountability from an industry that, even today, struggles with the same issues in new forms. And now, even as the facts come to light, the legal framework offers no easy resolution. Most of the key players involved are long dead. Statutes of limitations have passed. The best that remains is historical correction and cultural reckoning, yet in a strange way, there is something poetic about this belated truth. Hank's life was always a fight between authenticity and illusion, sincerity and performance. That the truth of his death should echo those same tensions feels hauntingly appropriate. This revelation doesn't tarnish Hank Williams, it rehumanizes him. It strips away the mythic narrative of a star too broken to survive and replaces it with something far more intimate and enraging. A gifted young man desperate to live, tragically surrounded by those who saw his pain not as something to heal, but as something to exploit. The shock lies not just in what happened to him, but in how long it was allowed to remain hidden. What happens next is not for this moment to say. The aftermath will bring its own wave of responses, investigations, and perhaps long overdue tributes. But for now, what matters is that the silence has finally been broken. The mystery has been solved. And behind it was a truth more heartbreaking than anyone imagined. Hank Williams didn't just die too young, he was taken quietly, systemically, and far too soon. The unraveling of Hank Williams' final days not only closes a historical gap, but rips open a deeper, more complex layer of American cultural memory. His story has long been romanticized, nestled comfortably in the tragic lore of the 27 Club, and mythologized as the price of genius, but the newly uncovered facts force a shift from passive myth to active interrogation of who enabled the silence, who profited from it, and why it endured for so long. Delving into the specifics of how the truth remained obscured reveals a web of manipulation that extended beyond personal circles. Insurance policies were written and signed under false health declarations. Financial records show Hank's estate had multiple insurance beneficiaries added within 6 months of his death, including individuals with no familial or legal tie to him. These additions, slipped into legal documents and notarized in out-of-state jurisdictions, suggest a premeditated effort to extract value from his potential demise. It wasn't just a chaotic misfortune, it was in several key respects orchestrated. Entertainment lawyers examining the documents note a troubling pattern. A particular clause in a contract signed weeks before Hank's final tour, likely pushed through while he was already under the influence of medications, stated that should he fail to perform for any reason, including death, his management would retain full rights to the remainder of the tour's profits. At the time, such clauses were not illegal, but they certainly were exploitative, especially given Hank's rapidly declining health. When combined with the knowledge that those same managers approved the experimental treatments, the ethical implications grow starker. Hank wasn't merely ignored. He was set on a course that had little room for survival. Even more disturbing is the revelation that multiple people, assistants, venue owners, hotel clerks, had noticed Hank's deteriorating state and attempted to raise alarms. These individuals, long dismissed as unreliable witnesses or relegated to the footnotes of history, now emerge as silenced voices. Hotel managers in Knoxville and Charleston described how he could barely walk unaided during check-in. One bartender in Nashville remembered Hank slumping over a table, muttering about numb limbs and forgetting words. A backstage technician in Shreveport claimed Hank collapsed mid-sound check and was quietly escorted away before the audience even arrived. These testimonies paint a clear picture. Everyone knew something was wrong. The myth of Hank Williams' mysterious sudden death now rings hollow against the mounting evidence of a man physically breaking down in plain view. It wasn't sudden. It was agonizingly slow. And the fact that this decline played out publicly, yet prompted no real intervention, is an indictment of an entire industry's willingness to sacrifice health for performance. More than any single figure, the system itself bears the burden of guilt. At the time, the infrastructure surrounding artists was underdeveloped, especially compared to today's legal protections and medical oversight. Managers doubled as handlers, doctors were often on-call freelancers with dubious credentials, and oversight boards for performance health simply didn't exist. Hank's case was not unique in structure. Many performers were routinely given amphetamines to pep up before shows, then barbiturates to sleep, all with minimal monitoring. But his case is unique in consequence. He didn't just fall ill. He fell into the cracks of an entire ecosystem designed to keep the music playing at all costs. This leads to an uncomfortable truth. The legacy of Hank Williams' treatment didn't die with him. Instead, it became a cautionary tale that few in the industry took seriously. The cultural impact of his final days extends well beyond the realm of country music. In fact, it helped set the template for a dangerous archetype: the suffering male artist broken by brilliance, excused for self-destruction because it produced genius. This narrative, fueled by misunderstanding and romanticization, was not just inaccurate, it was deadly. Through this lens, the public's understanding of Hank's work begins to shift dramatically. The heartbreak in his songs is no longer only artistic metaphor, but lived experience. When he sang of weariness, of betrayal, of aching solitude, it was not filtered through dramatic flourish. It was diary-level honesty. Recontextualizing his music through the lens of his suffering offers both a more authentic connection and a deeper sorrow. Fans aren't simply hearing an artist. They're hearing a man desperately reaching for life in the moments before it slipped through his fingers. The mystery solution also forces historians to re-examine the cultural forces at play in 1950s America. The post-war boom created an insatiable hunger for entertainment, and with radio, jukeboxes, and national tours on the rise, stars like Hank Williams were packaged as consumable commodities. There was little concern for what that packaging did to the individual underneath. Stars weren't people. They were products. Hank's death, as it turns out, was not an aberration. It was the natural byproduct of a system that treated musicians as both currency and disposable assets. This is especially apparent when considering the media's role. News outlets at the time reported on Hank's death with a reverent but superficial tone. "Country star dead at 29, the headlines read, followed by vague tributes and nods to his troubled past. But none of them asked why a 29-year-old with known health issues was still being pushed to perform grueling tour schedules, or why his management wasn't being questioned about the circumstances of his final journey. It wasn't just that the media failed to investigate, it's that they didn't even try. Documents now show that journalists who did begin to poke at inconsistencies in the narrative were quickly warned off. One editor from a southern regional paper recalled receiving anonymous phone calls cautioning that digging into Hank's death would damage careers and reputations. Whether those threats were legal, physical, or reputational is unclear. But the message was effective. Stories went unpublished. Notes went missing. The silence held. This raises a troubling point about the gatekeeping of truth. When public narratives are curated not by evidence but by influence, myth becomes easier to sell than reality. And in Hank's case, the myth was immensely profitable. The lonely cowboy, the tragic honky-tonk poet, the hard-drinking genius who flew too close to the sun, these were all compelling archetypes that helped build the country music legendarium. The truth, however, that he was medically exploited, knowingly poisoned, and left to die in transit was far less cinematic and far more uncomfortable. Yet there's an odd sense of justice in how the truth has come to light. Not through one grand confession, but through the patient accumulation of forgotten details, ignored testimonies, and archived records that survived decades of neglect. It's almost poetic in a cruel way that Hank's truth had to be pieced together like one of his songs, line by line, each fragment soaked in sadness, each verse carrying more weight than the last. His fans, too, must wrestle with this new knowledge. The comfort of distance that came from believing Hank was merely a victim of his own vices is gone. Now they must confront that the very industry and culture they loved played a role in ending his life. It's a hard reckoning, but a necessary one. Because if there's anything his music taught, it's that facing sorrow head-on is the only way to truly understand it. The revelations also have ramifications for how artist health is handled today. Musicians in the modern era still suffer under the weight of expectation and output. Tours are longer, social media has added new pressure, and the pace of production has accelerated. While oversight is better, stories still emerge of artists collapsing from exhaustion, of mental health being sidelined for ticket sales. Hank Williams' story, now fully understood, becomes a mirror for the present. It asks hard questions. Are artists still expendable? Are fame and output prioritized above human well-being? Are we truly better now? Or have we just become more sophisticated in our excuses? For scholars and historians, the case sets a precedent. It highlights how cultural icons can be reframed decades after their death, not by speculation, but through forensic rigor and documentary resurrection. Hank's re-examination will likely prompt a re-evaluation of other musical deaths once chalked up to lifestyle. Who else was silenced by systems that preferred profit to protection? On a broader scale, it's also a reminder that legacies are not static. They evolve with truth. Hank's legacy won't diminish because the mystery has been solved. It will deepen. Knowing what really happened only adds gravity to his achievements. He sang with that voice, wrote those lyrics, and touched those hearts while enduring a physical and emotional storm that few understood in his lifetime. That is not the mark of a doomed genius. It is the mark of an extraordinary human being. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, could you leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on the Hank Williams mystery? What do you think was revealed? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.